What is the hardest job interview question you've had to answer and how did you handle it? Them. Why shouldn't we hire you? Me. Because I care about my family more than my job, and if I have to choose between them and work, I'll choose them. I got the job. I was going for my first job change as I was sick of working in fast food and thought a liquor store would be a good option. In the interview I was asked to tell a story and the interviewer said, "It doesn't have to be related to the job or anything. Just tell me a story that you find interesting." That is not something I prepared for in the slightest. So, I recently had an email interview before I had to attend a second in-person interview. No big deal. It was a list of 10 questions. I answered them, double-checked my work, submitted. When I got to the in-person interview, dude laughed at me and asked how I had such attention to detail when I'd only answered half of the questions. I just sat there stupefied until I asked him if the rest of my email was on the back of his paper. It was. He had printed double-sided and not even checked. But the hardest part of answering was my own stammering and trying not to call him out for his own mistake. About a year ago, I got called in for an interview at a business I applied for. They started interviewing me on questions that seemed kind of strange. Questions like, "Can you tell us more about your event planning experience?" I was thrown off, and it became clear when the interview was about 3/4 of the way through that they were not asking me questions for the job I applied for. They were interviewing me for an event planning position and I applied for a job in tourism and marketing. I finished the interview, shook hands and went on my way. Ended up getting the job in event planning despite having little to no experience in the field. It wasn't a single question so much as it was their method of deep follow-up questions that eventually got to a point to where they basically asked me why I'm alive. Not as a "what's your motivation in life" sort of way, but in a "why do you exist" human way. I repeated to them, "You're asking me why I'm alive," and they took a short pause to realize where their follow-up questions took them and replied, "Yes. I've never had anyone question my existence before." "You're in Boston but not in the USA. How can this be?" I said, "There's a Boston in England." Correct answer was, "It's before the American Revolution." I got the job. Q. What have you learned in your current job? Was working a part-time customer service for 2.5 years. Not my field, and I hate customer service. A. With a smile on my face, that I never want to do that again. Got the job. Learning what you don't like or aren't good at is actually an extremely valuable lesson. Difficult to answer with that honestly in an interview in most cases though, lol. My boss. So what made you apply for this position? Me. I actually have no memory of applying for this job. Turns out she sniped my resume when I applied for a job debating with insurance companies and decided to see what I'd say. I applied for a job debating with insurance companies. I know all of these words, but have no clue on what you want them to mean when put together. You've suddenly been shrunk down to the size of a quarter and dropped into a blender. It's turning on in 10 seconds. What's your plan? Sing in a really high opera voice and shatter the blender's glass, of course. The only thing we see being an issue for you is the commute of just over an hour. How do you feel about it? We lost the previous person in your role because of a similar commute length. I had never commuted more than half an hour before, so I genuinely didn't know. I said I didn't think it would be an issue but genuinely couldn't say yes or no. I asked a salary at the middle of what they were advertising based on experience. They offered me £4k more, the full amount advertised. My agency said he got the impression they wanted to give me an incentive to take the role and cover the commute drive cost. I ended up moving to within half an hour a month in. The commute drove me crazy, and I happened to need to move anyway. I was asked the same. I said, "This is my second interview on site. The drive is easy and peaceful. I would stock up on podcasts and audiobooks." I got the offer but turned it down because of the commute. I applied to an administrative job at an elite university on the East Coast and made it to the final round of the interview. It was just me and one other candidate and we both met with one of the VPs. The question itself wasn't difficult, but the manner in which it was asked really threw me off. The VP essentially walks into the room, shakes my hand, and before we even sit down, asks me, "So, what can you do for me?" I was expecting the first 2 minutes to be small talk, so I was caught completely off guard by the straightforwardness of the question. I mumbled out an answer, but I knew right away I didn't impress. The interview only lasted another 15 minutes and needless to say I didn't get the job. My first instinct would be to just say something vague but enthusiastic and give a big smile like, well, hopefully make your job easier. The company is rolling out a new customer rewards cards across the country, but they're not sure if it will be profitable. In addition, certain provinces have regulations that restrict the use of selling these cards. Do you decide to launch it or not? What are the key considerations? I had to draw up some master plan with calculations in 30 minutes in front of them. It was one of those hypothetical case questions they asked me before I got the job. I would like someone to correlate the type of interview question asked versus the salary band of the role. Most of these trick questions are for entry level. Executive level conversations happen over lunch and are more personality fit based. About 7 years ago, I interviewed for a job with EMC. Think big data storage company. I went through about 8 interviews, including a panel and questions. All seemed to go well, but the big guy, technical lead, wanted a one-on-one since he couldn't make the panel. He then began spitting off over the top questions to me, just to get me to say I don't know, which was very difficult as I was presenting on a whiteboard my own storage array topology. Obviously I didn't get the job. That must suck, going through the hassle of 8 interviews and still not getting through. Yesterday was awesome. One day your parents are going to die. After you bury them, you will never talk to them again. They're gone forever. You will have to look in the mirror and ask yourself, was I a good son to my parents? Well, yesterday was awesome. Are you a good son? This was for a post-law school pre-bar exam results interview with a judge. Needless to say, I didn't take that job. Interviewing for my current internship explained to me why a condo circuit breaker is 208V instead of 240V like a house. For reference, the interview was done on site walking around. There were a lot of questions like this, and as a third year bitch student I didn't have the answers to a lot of them, but this was the toughest for me to figure out. I answered by saying I don't know, but then asked him if he could explain it to me. The interview ended up taking 2.5 hours instead of 1 because my now boss was having fun doing it. Talking to him now, he said the honesty of I don't know and then following up by asking got me the job. Apparently it was something no one should have known cause it has to do with how the fans need to operate in the basement. Some of the people reacted really poorly and got visibly upset that they were being asked unfair questions. Others said they didn't know, but I was the only one who followed up wanting to find out the answer. He wanted someone who wanted to learn and that sold him on me. I got a combination question. You like black people? Okay, yeah, well, what's the best flavor of Kool-Aid? Backstory: the manager had forgotten about my interview and told the 2 guys working that night to interview and hire me. The correct answer is grape, but I think Purplosaurus rex is the best. It's a combination of grape and lemonade. They asked me to verbally give a SQL query to problems they would say. They wouldn't let me see it written or write out anything. The tables were unfamiliar to anyone who didn't work at this company. It was their own database for their own software. I gave it a try for the first couple and they got progressively harder and the interviews got more rude. On top of it, we were in an office where they were answering calls on the phone for work stuff. It was nuts. I told them I wasn't interested in working for them and left. Example question: tell me the insert statement. The table name is something something table with 10 columns named lists of names of columns that are full words or acronyms. You want to insert long list of values. Wow, that's really crappy. It was a lunch interview and at the end, the manager asked, who was our server today? I had zero idea because I was more focused on hearing the specials than her name. Must have made me look like a snob though because I didn't get the job. I applied for a security job and was asked, what do you think makes you qualified for this job? I replied, I've been stealing crap for years and have yet to get caught. I know all the tricks. Got the job and made a great friend. Well, that's risky. It wasn't so much a question as it was a situation. I attended a round of interviews right before graduating college. The company flew me and 2 of my classmates out. Small field, and my school is well known for it. They put us each in different rooms and we interviewed with several departmental heads from the company. The interviews were pretty standard. I could tell they were trying to see who would fit best into their company culture, as well as perform the job well. We were all qualified, so it came down to personality. Everything was standard until the third manager that interviewed me. He came in, shook my hand, and sat down. Average height, maybe 220 pounds. He had thick, black, oily, curly hair, cropped neatly on top of his head. He had an odd posture, kind of holding his head back, the way anyone would do when trying to give themselves a second chin, pushing his jaw down into his neck a bit. I remember every detail about this guy because of the interview. He began talking to me a bit, but then it happened. PLBBBBBBBBLT. In the middle of his sentence he straight up just made a fart noise by sticking his tongue out of his mouth, closing his lips and blowing. It was quick, but it caught me completely off guard. He went right back into what he was saying. He only did it once before finishing what he was saying, and I started to answer. However, as soon as he stopped talking and started listening, I began to get assaulted by loud, longer, face like a pufferfish, fart noises. It was clear he was trying to suppress it, but that it was very hard. Crap. This guy has Tourette's. Either he has Tourette's or he is freaking with me on a major level. Whenever he spoke it was less often, less intense. But whenever I was talking I could tell he was trying to listen intently, but he couldn't contain himself nearly as well. The interview went on, and eventually finished. I was stone-faced, made it through 2 more rounds and they took us for lunch. He continued to do it occasionally there, with the rest of his co-workers. None of them reacted, so I felt affirmed that it must be Tourette's. After a long day they took me and my classmates back to the airport. As soon as we got through security we all completely broke down. We had all come to the same conclusion, but to this day I really don't know if it was some kind of interview tactic or not. I'll never know. If you had an important deadline and your child was also very sick, which would you attend to first? Come into work and for the deadline or tend to your child? I almost did not take the job once they offered it to me because this question bothered me. If you're in the US I'm fairly sure they're not allowed to ask you about childcare. As an employer I wouldn't feel comfortable asking this question. When I was 15 and a manager at the A&W asked me about my previous work experience. I manage our healers and loot distribution in our WoW raiding guild. Would you rather focus on one thing and do it 100% well while 2 other things do poorly, or would you rather do 3 things at 70%? It was a tough question. I think my answer would be that the situational is purely contextual. There are tasks that can be completed in a less than perfect manner without causing issues, which would allow for the first situation. Similarly, there are tasks that do require a certain level of commitment, which would necessitate the second situation. What is your worst quality? I told them I wasn't a good team player and greatly prefer to work alone. I also said I knew it wasn't a good quality to have in that environment, but it was something I was actively working on fixing. I was interviewing to work at a treatment center for youth recovering from addiction and eating disorders. Question: if we asked you to do something you felt was morally wrong, would you trust that we are more skilled and understand the situation better and do it anyway? Answer: I don't think I could in good conscience do something I felt was wrong regardless of the situation. I didn't get the job. They were shut down a year later. For a software developer job with minutes, 5 years experience, I got asked out of 10 how would you rate your .NET knowledge. I answered about 6 out of 10 inches. He looked at me very puzzled and said, we've just had a guy in here straight out of university and he's rated himself 9 out of 10 inches. I replied he's not even aware of the things he doesn't know about. .NET is huge. If I was 9 out of 10 I wouldn't be here. He had a developer in the room and he looked at him like I'd just spat on his kids. He then asked, why do you want this job? I said, I don't think I do. You approached me and we agreed to go our own ways. I don't know why he was offended. I actually thought it was a good answer. In the event of a fire in the building, is your first priority to pull the alarm or call 911? Caught me off guard and said pull the alarm. Correct answer was both. Surely they both can't be first priority. I think you were right, as pulling the alarm usually signals to the emergency services anyway. I got asked to sell them a pen the interviewer pulled out of her jacket. I had watched The Wolf of Wall Street 3 times already, and after what they explained to me previously I wasn't interested in the job anymore, so pretty much reenacted the scene. Still got the job. Sell me this pen. Hands you the pen. Well sir ma'am, it appears you no longer have any pens. You can borrow this one with a small deposit and $0.05 an hour. Or it's yours to keep for $1. I'm not sure how you're going to keep notes without it. I applied to one of these annoying startups that treats the office like a second living room and expects employees to act like a close circle of friends. They thought they were really original and fresh. I had an interview over the phone and expected somewhat weird questions. Instead, they made me conduct the interview as if I were the one interviewing them. Honestly, that's a pretty bad idea. It felt like they wanted to show off how out of the box they are. But they learned hardly anything about their potential employee. It went rather well. Nevertheless, since I'm used to interviewing people for my job, in the end I wasn't offered a position. After having me work on a mock project that took over a day to finish, they told me my work was great, but unfortunately they had already someone in mind for that position, even before I applied. That's 2 days of my life I will never get back. That's 2 days of my life I will never get back. Better to waste 2 days and be done with it than actually working at a place like that. Had an interview at Starbucks years ago. They asked me to describe a real event where I fought conflicted with a coworker, and the exact steps I took to fix the situation. I'd never been in an applicable situation and told them so. Wrong answer was not optional and had to give an in-depth answer. I get that they were probably working off some corporate script, but still not sure what exactly I was supposed to say. Making up stories and making mediocre coffee don't really have much in common. Used to work for Starbucks and I remember that question. It was my first job, so I didn't even have coworkers before that, so I used some story from high school that was extremely lame, but I tried. For me, I hate what salary do you want? I think it's mostly a trap question to see if you're greedy or willing to work for peanuts. I always say based on what I've learned about Ziz Corp, I'm confident that if you extend me an offer it will be competitive based on my experience. Friend of mine got the question, what is your biggest character flaw that would make us not want to hire you? He told me, he answered, I'm so arrogant I honestly can't think of another flaw that would make you not want to hire me. What do you feel are your biggest weaknesses? Jesus, I couldn't stop talking. Just kept digging myself deeper and deeper into a hole. I guess I thought they'd appreciate my honesty. Eventually, when I'd run out of actual weaknesses, I started inventing some. Did not get the job. Eventually when I'd run out of actual weaknesses, I started inventing some. I'll take moments that keep me up at night for $15 HR. Jim. I interviewed with Marvel. The interview went incredibly well. And the last question they asked is, who is your favorite hero? And to this day I regret not saying Agent Phil Coulson and just going with Spider-Man because there was a giant Spider-Man mural on the wall next to us. Don't work there full time, but they do hire me out as a freelancer from time to time, which is really cool. Agent Phil Coulson is absolutely the right answer. Them. Looking confused, I'd resume. So, tell me why you want to be an accountant. Me. I don't want to be one. Them. Silence. Bit intrigued. Ha. Me. I applied for a consulting position. Them. Oh, there must have been a mix-up. Sorry. Me. Thinking. Glad I drove 3 hours from Connecticut to Boston for this interview. Total interview time, about 45 seconds start to finish. Didn't get the job. Did get one in consulting with another company. I had a similar thing happen. Someone started asking me marketing interview questions when the job was in product development. It was really awkward, but after a couple minutes we realized they'd given the interviewer the wrong information. Thankfully she shifted gears and we had a nice recovery. What the frick is Gmail.edu? That's the domain name you get when your crappy college deletes your email address and you have to change your resume over from your school email address to your personal email address and you frick it up. Got the job. Probably liked the honesty. Tell us, why do you want to work in a jail? Me. Something about sifting through inmates' poop really makes me wanna, find contraband. Idiot. Username disturbingly relevant. I was applying for a sales position at a major firearms retail store. The application asked for my hobbies. I listed hiking, kayaking, fishing, and beekeeping. At the end of the interview, my now manager read over my application. I saw his eyebrow go up and he said, "Under hobbies, you list beekeeping. Tell me about beekeeping." Another manager, the regional manager, and the corporate director of operations were also in the room. I saw all of their eyes simultaneously snap up from their notes and focus on me. Suddenly, after a great interview, I was the weird little beekeeper in a small, hot room. So I told them about bees and keeping them. I had their rapt attention, told them lots of cool stuff about bees. I closed with, "So if I get this job, then a few times a year I'll bring in jars of honey for my favorite managers. If you can keep your cool in a sweaty beekeeper's suit while thousands of bees are trying to sting your face, a job interview is a breeze." I'd honestly be interested in knowing about the beekeeping than interviewing anyone. A question that sort of took me by surprise at the end of the interview was something along the lines of what reasons would make you refuse the position if you got the job. I was flustered and hesitated many times and ended up saying something cringy like, "I tend to give new opportunities one chance. Either way it will be a learning experience." I got the job and been working there for 9 months now. I had progressed to the final round of interviewing, and it was the boss's task to interview the final candidates. First question was asked how many beers I could handle. It was an interview for an office job and the question had zero relevance to neither position nor industry. I really wanted the job, but it was clear that the guy had zero interest in the whole interview process. I just replied that he'd have to wait until the office Christmas party to find out. I got the job. If I asked your friends to describe you, what would they say? I had an interview for a project engineer position. The interview question was, what would you do if you purchased and installed a new piece of equipment and then have the line supervisor tell you that they gave you the wrong specs? I think it's an excellent question that caught me a bit off guard because it demonstrates your conflict resolution and problem solving skills. Honestly, what do you do? I applied for a management role in my first job when I didn't have any management experience and got knocked back. The person they hired failed miserably, and I went for it again about 3 months later. They asked me, "So you applied 3 months ago and were turned down. Why do you think you'll get it this time?" I answered, "This is still my first job. Without leaving and becoming a manager elsewhere, I still have not been a manager. What I've done instead is taken every opportunity to gain the relevant traits you're looking for. So volunteered to coach the group of new starters we had. I took customer escalations where they've asked to speak to a manager myself and resolved them. I've made myself a presence in the office so that if there is an issue and there isn't a manager around, staff come to me for help or advice. I'm doing small parts of the manager's role every day." I got the job, and in my feedback they said it was between me and someone else and was incredibly close, but I got the job based on that answer, so I'm pretty proud of myself. That's one of the best ways to answer that question. I am impressed. I was asked if I'd rather do my own annual self-evaluation, including a list of goals and objectives for the forthcoming year, or have a department head fulfill this role. I opted for the self-evaluation, stating that I'm my own sharpest critic and always striving for improvement. That worked well for the interviewer as it displayed determination coupled to the ability to work independently. I'd want us both to do it. I would want to self-reflect, but have an outside voice to look from a clearer perspective and look for areas of improvement. The third time he asked, "Do you have any questions for me?" I thought, oh crap, Reddit said I should ask questions, but we've already been over every single thing already and I've already came up with all the questions I can think of. Why does he keep asking? At this point it would just be ridiculous, right? What do I do in like a 5-second panic? I was so nervous. I just said no, I think we've been over everything. Side note, called me back 30 minutes later and offered me the job. I start next week. Recently I was asked if you can have dinner with any deceased person, who would it be, and I was unprepared and blurted Nikola Tesla and then went on a 3-minute tangent about how Edison screwed him over and AC versus DC. No, the job had nothing to do with physics. It was marketing. I also got asked to write down how many things you can do with a newspaper and was given 10 minutes to write as many as possible. One of my answers was cover a car as a prank. I'm working at that job now. Comma Nicole Tesla. Nicole give me the formula. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.